I worked so hard in law school that a terrifying ghost started following me everywhere I went. College was the hardest time of my life because I was expected to juggle work, school, and a social life, all while trying to maintain a healthy sleep schedule. At first, it was doable. I wasn't taking too many classes and work was usually slow, so I had plenty of time to do my homework and befriend my coworkers. But in my second semester, I had to take extra classes to fulfill all my credits for my major. The place I worked at closed down, so I was out of a job, and my homework pile kept growing, so I never got time to go out. I tried to convince my parents to pay the rent for my apartment until I could get a job, but they said they would only do it on one condition. I needed to get straight A's. That meant I had to work harder than ever before. I was studying law, which required a lot of reading and memorizing. I wanted to be able to study and still sleep, and I had the mentality that if I didn't know something by 1 a.m., then I just didn't know it. That way, I wouldn't need to pull all-nighters and could get plenty of sleep. Except that this mentality was ruining my grades. They started falling from A's to B's and B's to C's. I had to hold up my end of the deal with my parents, or else I would have to move back in with them and drop out since it was a 3-hour drive to school. So when a really important test was coming up, I decided to stay up all night to study. I had to power through by drinking coffee, but at least I was learning much more than if I had just slept. By the time 11 a.m. hit, I was ready to go to bed. I had some time in between classes to sleep at my apartment, but I knew that my alarm wouldn't be able to wake me up. When I took the test, I knew all the information and my grade went up from a C to a C+. By then I was sure this new routine was working out for me and I just needed to do it for a while. Although I was sleepy, I couldn't sleep the night after that, either because I was working on all my assignments to improve my grades. The next day, I could barely keep my eyes open and my caffeine intake was horrendous since I was drinking 2 cups of coffee every hour to keep myself awake and not feel like I was dying. I somehow got through my classes but then got assigned a mock trial, so I had to do lots of reading to brush up on the criminal history of the person I was prosecuting. For the third day in a row, I was up all night reading about the case of Junko Furuta, a Japanese girl who was unalived for rejecting a guy. She was tortured for 44 days straight before the guys were done with her and then buried her body in concrete. I had to do a lot of research to get all my facts straight, even looking at images from the crime scene, and each was more terrifying than the last. It was the most horrific case I had ever read. Every detail of her torture made me want to throw up. I didn't realize I had spent all night reading up on her until the sunlight beamed in through my window. When I started to get ready for school, I noticed that something was different that day. It was like the wind was howling my name, and I could feel eyes on me from every corner of my apartment. I ignored it, but the biggest jump scare of my life came when I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw the scarred face of Junko Furuta staring back at me. She was bruised and beaten, and blood covered her cheeks. I was scared to turn around because I could feel her behind me. My body froze, and all the hairs on my neck stood up. I was having a staring contest with her through the mirror, and her saddened eyes burned holes into my soul. It wasn't until I finally blinked that her image went away. I shook it off and continued getting ready for school. Getting there was a nightmare on its own though. Some people around me had holes all over their bodies and bugs were crawling all over their insides. I couldn't even get near a person without freaking out and screaming at them to get away from me. Other people were 8 feet tall and were stomping on everybody, and their body parts were scattered everywhere. I kept doing everything to avoid getting splashed with blood, and I stopped paying attention to where I was going, so I even ended up on the street and almost got run over by a car. I rubbed my eyes to make everything go away, but everything worsened. I was sobbing hysterically at this point, and I sat on the ground with my head down to calm myself down. I breathed in and out and told myself none of this was happening. I stayed like that for a few minutes, and when I thought everything was back to normal I looked up. But I should have prayed harder because the first thing I saw was a bunch of dead bodies clinging to another person. When the ghosts noticed I saw them, they all looked at me at the same time and screeched out a whiny help. I pulled my hair in agony and slapped my cheeks to make myself see things normally again. I was sweating and trembling, and I looked like a crazy person sitting on the edge of the sidewalk. But the worst was Junko Furuta sitting beside me, crying with me. I jumped up and ran away. I couldn't stand to sit with her right beside me, but she brought it upon herself to follow me throughout the entire day. It always freaked me out when she stood close to me, and my heart was going to explode. I kept holding back tears in class when she would play with my hair, and I was always scared to look at her because her face was peeling, her eyes would occasionally pop out of their sockets, and sometimes her knees would give out. So she had to crawl beside me like something right out of the movie Ring. I had never been more scared in my entire life, and I just wanted to end it all to make everything go away. And then at the end of my last class, she reached out to grab my hand. She had never made skin contact, and the fact I could feel her bruised, rough hands terrified me more than anything. I screamed so loud and ran out of the class to try to get away from her. That's when I got fed up and realized that I needed to make this go away. I was convinced this was due to my horrendous lack of sleep, so just sleeping would fix it, right? But that night I lay in bed for nearly 2 hours before I realized that I couldn't sleep at all. Junko was lying beside me and sleeping like a doll, but I was wide awake. I was frozen in place, tense as hell, and scared that one little movement would wake her up and she would jump on top of me. I desperately needed some sleep, so I decided to go online and research why this was happening and how to fix it. It didn't take long to figure out I was hallucinating from being sleep deprived, and because I was having trouble sleeping, the only way to get some sleep was to take a sleep formulation of magnesium, apigenin and glycine. I personally chose portal sleep. Melatonin wouldn't help with something this drastic because that wouldn't relax me at all. I would be knocked out for the night, but I would wake up tired in the morning and my hallucinations would still be there. But magnesium would get rid of the stress and anxiety I've been feeling for the past 3 days while I tried to get my grades up. Glycine would make sure I never woke up tired in the morning, and apigenin would get rid of my intrusive thoughts so I wouldn't be getting a visit from Junko Furuta in my dreams. I bought all the ingredients the next morning and mixed them up into a glass of water that night at 8 p.m. I needed to sleep and had no choice but to hope the formulation worked. The next day, I woke up at noon and Junko was still beside me. Though, she seemed a little less scary that day because her face was normal. Her bruises weren't as apparent and the blood around her body had begun to disappear. Since she was still here, I was terrified to go out because I didn't want to see anybody with holes or people getting crushed, but I had already missed 2 classes that morning from oversleeping and couldn't afford to miss any more if I wanted to get straight A's. When I went out, things were pretty normal and I was starting to relax again, but I realized Junko was still following me around. I still couldn't look at her for too long because her legs gave out more than the day before and I didn't want to see her body contort the way it did, with one leg over the other and dragging herself with just one hand. I barely made it throughout the day, but I came to the conclusion that the sleep formulation I had mixed up put my mind at ease and stopped some of my hallucinations. And for the first time ever, my anxiety didn't bother me since I stopped worrying about things I couldn't control. So, that night I drank it again and realized Junko was sleeping on the couch instead of next to me on the bed, as if she didn't want to be near me. I went to sleep and started dreaming of being in my favorite show, but I noticed something was different in my dream. Everything was so vivid and felt real, like I was actually in the show's world. I started exploring the place, but walking felt tiring and I wished I could fly just to speed things up. And when my feet lifted off the ground, I saw that I was flying. It was like I had full control of my dream, which had never happened before. I decided to test the theory out and make a golden sword appear. It happened instantly, but the gold sword appeared out of thin air. I spent the rest of my dream trying different things, like being a successful lawyer in the future, partying with my favorite characters, and reliving the best parts of my life in real time. I was so amazed by everything that was happening. The best part came when I woke up and saw that Junko's body was blurring out, like she had to disappear but was trying to hold on to the real world. She stayed at my apartment that day and I finally felt relief that she wasn't following me around anymore. I was calm and at peace because I didn't see anything scary. I also searched what happened in my dreams and found out I was lucid dreaming, and it was all because of portal sleep. For the next week, I continued drinking the formulation and Junko faded more each day until she was completely gone. I never saw her again. Since I wasn't scared for my life all the time from seeing terrifying things and studying better, my grades had improved so much and my deal with my parents didn't seem so out of reach anymore. And I always had lucid dreaming to look forward to at the end of a busy day. I drank my sleep formulation to visit any fictional world because I wanted to do everything with my favorite fictional characters. In just a week, it seemed like the pieces of my life were rearranging again. All because I found a way to fix my sleep, and honestly because I was lucid dreaming. I can 100% recommend.